You're listening to the Roundup Podcast, a podcast on reaching the college campus, developing leaders, and sending out kingdom multipliers. This podcast is created by the Southern Baptists of Texas Convention and provided through cooperative program giving.
Well, howdy, friends, and welcome to the Roundup Podcast. I am your host, Mitch Tidwell. Thanks for joining us today. I'm really excited about today's podcast. We're going to talk community colleges and / kind of commuter schools. This is a ministry to these schools is always one of those kind of elusive ministries. Nobody's a master at it. Nobody kind of really knows what to do. That we have some successes, we have a lot of failures, and we really just kind of don't know what to do. So today I invited on Chris Cummings, who is the college pastor at Coastal Community Church in Galveston, Texas. Chris, how you doing?
I'm good. How you doing?
Dude, good. Glad to have you on. And we also have Andy Abramson, who is the founder and director of Elementum, which is a ministry that helps churches reach college and young adults. Andy, how's it going, brother?
Doing well. Excited to jump into this conversation today. So
yeah, man. It's going to be really good. So, guys, thanks for jumping on. So let's just start here. Chris, let's start with you because I know that you minister to a couple of different schools. You have Texas A&M Galveston, and then you have, is it Coastal Bend College? Is that correct?
It's Galveston College.
Galveston College. I'm sorry. Coastal Bend's in Beeville. It's a different place. Okay. Man, I've already ruined this podcast. We were just like a minute 30 in.
Yeah. We were doing so well before this moment. You just shot it.
Train wreck, man.
If you're listening, I would just, this is the best. You just saw the best.
No, so just hang on with us. All right. So, actually, you know, I was going to ask you to tell us a little bit, but before you do that, let me just kind of give a snapshot. I know our listeners, we have a lot in Texas, we have a lot outside of Texas, but I just want to give a snapshot of, when we think of community colleges, commuter colleges in Texas, that it actually makes up over 50% of the colleges and the students that we have in Texas. They're actually, when you look at four-year schools, we have 778,000 of those students, but we have 788,000 students that are in two-year schools. So we see, like, when we think about college ministry, it's usually, we think about four-year schools, but reality is over 50% of the students actually in our state. And I'm imagine, I even saw some stats in North Carolina that it's like even like 70% of their state that are in these kind of two-year community schools, commuter schools. So when you think of college ministry, it's really much more than just your four-year school. But we also know there's a lot of challenges with that. So with that said, Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about your ministry and kind of your ministry to the community college near you?
Yeah, so we've been doing college ministry in Galveston for roughly 5-6 years at this point. Our primary target so far has been Texas A&M University. It's the four-year college here in Galveston, the Galveston campus of A&M. And then our other focus for undergrad collegiate ministry is at Galveston College, which is a two-year program. At this point, when it comes to community colleges, let me just say, by no means have we figured out how to reach the community college well. Like, if you're listening to this and you know how to do that, please give me a call, because I will to steal your strategy, maybe even hire you to come do this here. But yeah, so just for us, we've reached out, and really one of the ways that God's kind of opened the door for us so far has been through the athletic department. So the head baseball coach at GC goes to our church, and we're good friends. And that's been a really helpful open door to be able to help meet some baseball players and people on the team. Same with softball. They go kind of hand in hand. And the nice thing about those two pockets of people is they are your typical college age. I think that's one of the difficulties with community colleges, is more so than a four-year school, your age variety is kind of all over the map a little bit more. So it's not only targeting the campus, but it's also kind of finding the people that are on the campus that are in that general kind of college life stage as well. But really our kind of inroad so far has predominantly been through athletics.
Gotcha. What's kind of been, and like you said, I think when we think of we think of college ministry, like a four-year school that has a lot of residential students versus that two-year school most of the time, like there's a commonality of, yes, there are students that are on the campus getting their education, but in some ways that's about as far as the commonalities go. Because you have at a community college, I mean, with where you're at, you have baseball, softball, and some things like that. But I even know the community college in my area, they don't have any sports or anything like that. And so the student that's on that campus, I mean, is ranging from 18 to 80 in age, with people getting their education. So it's just kind of wider. So let me ask you this question, Chris. What has been the difficulty that you've faced in reaching that Galveston College?
Yeah, a great question. I would say probably one of the biggest difficulties that we've kind of run into is really just finding the common place to meet students. Mm-hmm. Because it's a commuter school, they don't just stay on campus. I feel like your average commuter school student is coming to school, going to class, maybe a few classes depending on their schedule, and then they're just going home. Mm-hmm. There's no dorms for you to go hit. There's not a library or a quad for you to go hang out on and meet students. No one's just playing ultimate frisbee on the field, because at least where we are, there's just not a field to play it on. Yeah. And so I think that for me is probably just one of the biggest challenges of it's just hard to meet people there, because they're just they're just not there. They're there for their class, and then other than that, they're just not around. To compare that to the other campus that we reach, Texas A&M Galveston. Texas A&M Galveston, from our research, is about 75% of the student body lives on campus. Mm-hmm. Because at A&M Galveston, you can't live off campus until you're 21 years or older. Mm-hmm. And so because of that, we know where all the students are. Like, they're on campus, they're hanging out on campus, they're not going to class and then going off campus, because they live on campus, they eat on campus, they sleep on campus, like everything's on campus. Mm-hmm. Whereas the community college is just not that way. Yeah. You can catch some people maybe when they go to class, but there's not a lot of opportunity there. So
yeah,
that's been kind of our biggest hurdle.
Yeah, and I think that is for most ministries, is that you have most 4 years, you have more centralized community, whereas in community colleges is you're going to get more fragmented community, where it's all spread out. It's super wide. So let me ask you this, Chris. What has been, so the students that you have had who have been a part of your ministry, how did they get connected? Was it like just, hey, they grew up in your church, or like from youth and went to college? Were they invited by a friend? Did they just show up? How did that work out?
Yeah, mainly two roads. One being you were in our high school ministry, you graduated, and now you're doing community college on the island, and we picked you up and kind of naturally transitioned into college ministry. That's definitely been one. And then the other is athletics, like through the baseball team, softball team. Gotcha. We've been able to grab a few, and I do mean few. Yeah. So, for sure. So I mean, there's the inroads we've made in the community colleges. I mean, just to be completely transparent and honest, very not significant whatsoever. Like, we're still very much at a beginning state of, man, how do we really go after this, not knowing really hardly any students that are on that campus, and knowing that they're only there for a few years. That's the other challenge, right? With your average, I say average, like 4-year student, you have 4 years to develop them, help them become a disciple maker, and help them multiply on campus. But at a community college, you're looking at 2, maybe even only 1, which kind of has to fast track some of that development. And so, So those are all those things together create a very difficult environment to be able to meet, train, equip student leaders to go do the work of ministry.
Andy, did you have something?
No. He's hitting the spot on. No, that was good.
Yeah, it is, and I think it's just really is two different kind of ministries, and I think we probably just really have to have a paradigm shift of us as leaders, is probably not just beating ourselves up too much over it, because it is a harder ministry, or at least a more unknown kind of ministry. And so, Andy, I want to toss this to you. You have met with hundreds of leaders, helping them in these type of situations. A lot of times you're helping leaders that aren't even on staff and can't even commit full-time to something like this. So in your experience, what have you, for someone that's like Chris, what have you seen churches do that's been fruitful, or where do you kind of help them begin in this kind of domain of ministry?
Yeah, well, there's a couple things I think that you need to think about at the very forefront, and one of the things I think that we need to, when we think about community college, commuter college ministry, I think that we need to start with a foundation of disciple making, not a foundation of a program. I think one of the biggest hurdles that we see is that somebody will come in and say, how do I start a group? How do I start a service? How do I start, this kind of thing that we can get going? And so I think that that's actually kind of a backwards way to think about it, where if you start with discipleship first, where then you can begin to kind of build some momentum moving forward. And I think one of the biggest hurdles for, I think, on community college ministry is I see a lot of churches just trying to replicate like youth group 2.0, right? So in what happens is that you really are having kind of a heart for the believing student already. But I think that there has to be a fundamental shift in the churches to say, how do we begin to view that community college as a mission field, not just trying to take our seniors who maybe a few of them that stuck around and create another youth group experience for them, try to create a Bible study, a program or something. And so I think, the first thing is really kind of starting with the foundation of disciple making and kind of moving forward with that. But here's what I would say secondly, and you were talking about this a little bit earlier, Chris, is that I think you need to understand that it's a different game, that community college and commuter college ministry is different. There's some things that you need to understand. It's more transitional, right? That you understand that people are coming in and out, that it's harder to kind of capture. And in that, I think we need to set our proper expectations for what ministry looks like. So if you're going to be a leader who's going to look at another campus ministry that's on a 4-year college and compare yourself to that, you're going to find yourself in constant dissatisfaction, constant frustration, because you're asking yourself the question, why can't I build something? Why can't I sustain something? But if you can think about yourself of saying, okay, the way in which we do ministry is different on a community college campus. In some ways, you'll find yourself almost like rebuilding periodically. So you kind of build something up and you kind of find these ebbs and flows of ministry that are so essential. So when we're talking to a church, those are really kind of the two starting points that we help them understand is, one, think about disciple making first. And that's what I love, even Chris, where I think that you're in a good position because I know enough about your situation where you're going to lead with disciple making. And that's really going to be a way to create momentum on that community college campus. But then secondly, for those people who are even working solo on a community college campus, you have to understand it's different. You have to understand that your ministry is going to be different than a traditional 4-year campus. And you have to be okay with that. There's part of you that has to almost relish the opportunity to rebuild every 18 months, to kind of restart from scratch again. Because you were saying, Chris, even you might have people for 1 or 2 years. Sometimes you have people for a semester, then they're gone for a year, then they come back. It's so transitional. And so those would be a couple things that I would really encourage a church to start with. Foundation disciple making, have that proper understanding of what ministry looks like on a community college campus.
Yeah. You know what? I put the question out on Facebook, just asking a few different groups about questions regarding this. And one of the questions that kept coming up over and over was how do you take someone who's maybe going to be with you for 2 years? How do you build a deep connection? How do you really develop them? And here's the question that I just want to kind of toss out is really, can you build deep connections in a community college ministry? Is it possible? What do you guys think about that?
I definitely think it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things about our 4-year school that we deal with is that the Texas A&M Galveston is a 4-year school, but in some ways it operates as a commuter school,
Mm-hmm.
because the transient rate is incredibly high at A&M Galveston. So the culture of the school is A&M Galveston is seen not as like necessarily a sister school of A&M College Station, but as like a continuation of the campus. So when you go to A&M Galveston, you're a part of the Aggie family. You get the Aggie ring. Your diploma says A&M University, not A&M University at Galveston. And so it's very much a part of that. And so what we find is, even on our 4-year campus, we did a study a few weeks ago and found that around 50% of the freshman class that comes into A&M Galveston will transfer to College Station either after their freshman year or after their sophomore year. So even for us on our 4-year school, we are seeing students transition out of that campus in a 1 to 2 year time frame. And there's definitely and that hurts us, you know, from a leadership development standpoint and like a kind of ministry growth standpoint. As kind of pouring into leaders, we lose a lot of students that we think could be amazing leaders because of that high transition rate. But at the same time, through that even just 1 year and a half, 2 year time frame, we've developed such deep connections with some of those students that seeing them transition so quick is like almost like hurtful in a sense of just like, man, I miss that person. I wish they were still like around. And so I would say that the answer, definitely, I think you can create that momentum. You can create that deep connection with students in just a short period of time, because even though we haven't really seen a ton of that on the community college campus, we have seen a lot of that within the students that transfer out of the 4-year school that we also reach out to.
Oh, that's good, Chris. Andy, let me ask you this question. What kind of misconceptions maybe do some churches have when it comes to reaching this type of school? Are there any false barriers that they may have in just saying, well, it's hard, we can't do it? Or, you know, what is it? Have you seen anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, you have kind of some of your classic ones, like we were even alluding to earlier, of just that it can't be done. You know, it's not possible to do ministry. And I've even seen some churches kind of come to that conclusion. But the problem is like we've seen that as not to be true, or even the misconception that it's not worth our investment. And I hear that sometimes, because if a student's only going to be here for 18 months, is it really worth our church investing in? And we really want to kind of push back in that. And even I think you were alluding to, Chris, is that you can't have significant impact in a year or two, you know, which you were talking about isn't true, that you can, in a year or two, you can see significant growth and development of a student as you walk along and disciple them. So that would be kind of a few really kind of misconceptions that you see out there.
Yeah. You know, when I think about this ministry, one of the things that I've really honed in on, because I was involved in church for a while, that was a part of the leading the campus ministry on a community college. And, you know, we kind of pulled in our 20 to 25. We kind of fished out of that pond, but that was about the max that we were going to get kind of out of that kind of fishing pond, using that campus ministry on the school. And what I think probably what has to be done in this kind of community college settings, are realizing that, you know, you do have a campus that is much more diverse demographically than probably a 4-year school. You have people that are kind of built and wired differently, likely, that are on a 2-year school versus a 4-year school. And they're going to be dispersed all over a community or all over a town or all over a city. And so I feel like sometimes people say, well, it's really hard to make connections on campus. And I would totally agree with that. But I would say that then maybe your best effort at actually reaching those students that are actually on those campuses, not actually maybe on the campus, but maybe actually in the town or the city that campus kind of is in. What do you guys have to say about that? Is that something you've seen, or what do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Mitch. I think that in a lot of ways you have to like broaden. Yes, the campus is an opportunity or a mission field that you can engage with, but you have to be a little bit wider of your strategy in terms of how you engage with college students. One of the things that we've seen a lot of success in is like even people leveraging their homes, in terms of like inviting people into the home to have meals with them, to kind of create some of those spaces. And so I think that you need to have kind of a different approach of saying, yes, we're going to engage the campus. Yes, we're going to be present there. But I think we need to look a little bit wider when it comes to community college ministry in order, like you were saying, to do ministry in that context.
Yeah, like I wonder if, which again, this makes it a little bit harder, and I think that's really the difference with four-year school. It's a little bit, students are more centralized. Like Chris said, he's 75% of the students at his school are on Texas A&M Galveston are on the campus, but when you think about in the community college setting, like usually, because it's always, you always hear this, hey, they're on the school, they go on to campus to take the class, and then they're off. But chances are they're going to work, they're going to a coffee shop, they're going to eat, they're going to somewhere like that. And I think it takes the hard work of the collegiate leader, whoever that person is, to begin to identify. You're probably going to be fishing out of a bunch of mini ponds all over the town or city versus just the campus. And I think that's probably the hard work, where it takes that relational kind of grit and want to just kind of figure out where are these hot spots that students may be hanging out and how I can meet them there.
Yeah. And for most people, just to go off that a little bit more, is like most people have that spot, right? Like there's usually like the school or the place that you work, your home, and then kind of this third destination that is kind of in rotation that is regularly visited by a lot of people. And so I agree, like finding where those spots are that these students generally tend to hang out in can very much be where the big open door might be for community college ministries.
I totally agree with that. And here's the question I want to toss to you now, Chris. Okay, so you're kind of used to this rhythm of a 1 or 2 year thing before a student goes on. So how does you because you said hey, I think in 1 to 2 years you can make a difference. So how are you effectively doing that in this kind of 1 to 2 year span? How are you kind of getting traction and into really investing in developing a student in that short amount of time?
Yeah, I mean, kind of like what Andy was saying kind of earlier, is one of the things that we've done in the restructuring of our 4-year collegiate ministry is a real emphasis and a real focus on disciple making, equipping student leaders to be evangelistic and to live on mission on the campus and in the dorm rooms and in the classrooms, and to truly disciple other students. And so for us, that's been huge when it comes to helping make an impact in someone's life in a very short time frame. If we can get a freshman plugged into a group and then have a leader pour into them personally and invest in them in that way, man, that goes a really long way. And so for us, a lot of it has been leveraging the influence of the student leader who's on the campus 24/7. And I think that has to happen on the community college as well, is they're the ones that are allowed inside the classroom, and they're the ones that have access to kind of all the spots on campus that we generally won't find. They know where their friends are hanging out at. We don't really know where they are. And I think what you have to do is I think you have to start small and grab a few students that you meet and that love Jesus, and invest everything you have into those students and multiply yourself in them so that they can turn around and go reach the campus, because you're just not going to be there. I mean, even this last semester during COVID, we had to lean in hard. Our staff wasn't allowed on campus at all semester long. And so the ministry that we did all fall 2020 was completely 100% dependent on our student leaders taking ownership of it and leading out in that way. And I think that's that's like I think for us, just the biggest key is like grabbing student leaders, developing those student leaders, and then sending them back onto the campus to make disciples who make disciples, and that being your focus, and then invest as much as you most possibly can in them. And so we do a lot of investment in our student leaders. We have student leadership retreat once a week. We have a team kind of hangout and meeting where we just encourage each other and pray for each other. One of my residency staff, like her role on our team is just to coach group leaders, and so she meets with them monthly to just coach them, see where they're at, help them take next steps in their personal walk with the Lord and their ministry walk with the Lord, different classes, training exercises, all these kind of things we leverage to pour into our leaders, because we know that the healthier our leadership team can be, the more effective we'll be on the campus. And so we're investing a lot in that direction. And then through that, we're likewise investing a lot in the one student who's there for a year, 2 years.
That's really good. It sounds like you and Andy have been talking a little bit. You're like on the same track.
Yeah, copyright Andy Abramson.
Well, Andy, why don't you tag on to that? Because, what Chris said is like, hey, grab a few, start and develop them, make disciples, mobilize them to reach their peers. Anything that you would add to that of just, because I'm thinking about the person, I talk to these kind of leaders all the time that are really, they say, man, I've just got a few at my church. We just have this like Sunday school class and I really don't know what to do. We're just kind of going through rhythms of doing Bible study after Bible study, but where they're not reaching people and, I don't really know what to do at the campus. Like, what do you advise that person sitting in that situation?
Yeah, I mean, you just, in a lot of ways, like you have to get to where Chris has gotten, where you're reframing what success and what ministry looks like. Yeah. And, even for a lot of maybe local churches who are listening out there, maybe you're a church of 100 people or 150 people or even less than that, and there's this like thing of like, well, we can't reach a lot of college students, or we don't have the people or the manpower. But you might have one person who has a passion for it, or a couple that has a passion for it. And what if your church reached 5 college students and poured your life and discipled these college students well, so when they went to kind of their next season of life, they were equipped and ready to jump into it? Is that a win? And we know that is yes, but for some reason, what we think of is we got to have a big program to be successful, or we got to have 100 people on campus at a worship service to be successful. But I think part of it is just getting back to that disciple making that Chris was talking about, reframing that. And here's what I would say, even for, those churches who are listening out there right now, these leaders, man, it's every church's call to get in the game and engage with college students. It's not just the big church with the full-time college pastor like Chris. It's also the volunteer Sunday school leader, or the college student who has a passion for their campus or their community college. Like if you can pour your life even to 1 or 2 or 3 other college students around you, like there is rejoicing in heaven over that ministry. And we need to celebrate that work and really begin to elevate that as legitimate, successful, impactful kingdom work that's happening.
Man. Yeah, I totally agree. And yeah, just to kind of add on that. So Robert Coleman wrote a book. It's a classic disciple-making evangelism book called Master Plan of Evangelism.
I've never heard of it.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It's like, really? Like everyone else who's written discipleship books has referenced him, right?
Yes. It's everyone is like Master Plan of Evangelism 2.0, like basically. I feel like. It's so good. Yeah. But in it, what he writes is as he evaluates the life of Jesus, I remember one of the things he wrote. So it's like, it sticks with me like ever since I read it. And it was just what Jesus did for the few was always meant for the many. And I love that because Jesus intentionally gets small with a handful of the disciples, not because he's ignoring the masses, but because his heart is so much for the masses that the best way to reach them is to go small with the few so that he can go after the many. And that has to be, I think, your heartbeat for commuter college schools, because you're only going to probably start off with a few, and you don't have many years to get the masses, before the masses
transition out to another campus. And so I think your only hope is really to lean in hard with a few and disciple them well. And I would even think too, another thing is, what would it look like for churches, collegiate ministries to start grabbing some of these students as soon as they graduate out of high school and spend intentionally the summer in between high school and the start of their collegiate career, discipling them to where they can hit the ground running with discipleship and disciple making their very first fall semester at a commuter school. Because the reality for these commuter schools is very few people are traveling to go to a community college. It happens, but there has to be a pretty good reason why. If you're playing baseball or whatever, that maybe is a reason why. But for the most likely, the people that are going to be in that commuter college are the high school students that graduated from the high school down the street in your community.
Yep.
And so what would it look like to start working really closely with that high school pastor and say, hey, who are some of the people that are sticking around at this commuter school? Let me use this summer, 3 months leading up to it, and you pour everything you have into them so that they can go to that community college and pour everything they have into other students.
It's a good word, man. That's fantastic insight. And you think about too, that person is probably, like you said, they've probably grown up. You may have someone in this, you think about your future leaders that are on that 2-year campus are probably in your high school ministry, and there's probably a good chance that they may even be sticking around after college. And so it's just just the dynamic of it is just so different. It's completely different. Well, so I know that there's two things that I really feel like are the biggest need of students at least younger students in community colleges. Is one, we know they need the gospel, but two, we know that they deeply need community. I was even thinking about myself when I graduated high school. I had no idea what I was going to do. I spent 2 years in a community college and came away with 9 hours. It was a terrible 2 years. Most people get that in half a semester. But that was me. But I remember being at that place in my life where I was my community had kind of been broken because I had a lot of friends that went off to college, but I was still in community college. And I had a fraction of my friends that kind of stayed back. And I just think about doing ministry in the way of disciple making. What you're doing is you're calling people into relationship, into this relational kind of challenge relationship. And that's honestly really what they need. And so building small, starting small and building that disciple-making culture is really exactly what every student needs, is they need the gospel and they need gospel community. And so I think that's really fantastic insight from both of you. And Andy, I love talking to you because you're always hitting the reset button every time. I feel like every time I talk to Andy, it's I get ahead and he's like, whoa, hold on, let's go back to the basics. He's the classic coach that gets on your nerves, that's always talks about fundamentals, and you're wanting to run the trick reverse play or something. He's teaching you how to hand the football off. You're like, I'm tired of this. Is that not right, Chris?
That's good. That's very good.
Andy is that guy. Well, again, if you're listening to this podcast, we don't have any of this figured out. We're learning. Chris is learning. Andy's coaching people through it. I really don't know very much, but we want to talk around the topic. Just hopefully you can identify with some of these struggles, but also you got a few nuggets here that you can implement and you could think about in your ministry. But any kind of last words from you guys and just kind of wisdom as it comes to reaching, developing, and sending students on community colleges?
Yeah, I would say that the community college campus is an untapped resource.
It is, yeah.
An opportunity for collegiate ministry. I think everybody looks at us here in Austin, UT, or Texas A&M, or, some other big campus, and there's, 10, 15, 30, 50 campus ministries. But then you go on to these community college campuses and there's nothing. Mm-hmm. And so my encouragement for you, if you're listening, you have a community college campus, commuter campus in your community, man, that is a ripe harvest field. Yep. It's a huge opportunity it's blue ocean. It's huge potential for mission field and engagement. And so I would just encourage anybody listening who has a community college to jump in and to begin to build relationships with college students and equip them to be disciple makers on that campus.
That's good. Awesome. Thanks, Chris.
Going off that, I would just encourage, just don't ignore it. I mean, there are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of students that attend community college campuses, and we just can't ignore it. The Great Commission is meant for them as well, not just the four-year university. I'd also say I think when it comes to community college ministry, I think we just have to think very much with a kingdom-focused mentality. And just knowing that we might invest ourselves hard in a student for a year or 2 years and see the fruit of that investment at a completely different university campus somewhere else after they transition out. Mm-hmm. But it's still worth it. Mm-hmm. Even though it is difficult to raise up leaders to pour back into that very campus, if we can make disciple makers, that's a win. Mm-hmm. Whether they stay on our campus or whether they transition out, it doesn't matter. That is a win. And we have to think with that mentality of not just, hey, how can I build my ministry right here, but how can we build the kingdom of God all across the state of Texas or the country for wherever these students inevitably go back to. But not only that, but a lot of these students too have roots in the city that you're in. And so what family members can you get to? Yeah. What families can you impact for Christ through these students? What part-time jobs are they working that, a commuter college person, I think is probably even higher likely that they have a part-time job than potentially a four-year university student. Mm-hmm. And so what part-time employees are around them that you could potentially also be impacting through the investment of just a single person or a small group of people. And so I think our vision has to just be a little bit wider. We have to think more on a kingdom level rather than just our ministry level.
Chris, that's great insight, and it reminds me, because I think about my own personal story. I was that college age student. My parents had started a restaurant. I was running that restaurant, and I had a guy who was a 60-something-year-old deacon at a local church would come in and eat on a weekly basis and just became my friend. And he just started talking to me, and he would just say, "Hey, man, love for you to come to church." And I would just say, "Hey, well, thanks for the invite." And I would never show up. But then a year later, I did. And then when I did, I brought 4 friends with me. And then, and that's how I started going to church. And some of my friends started going to that church with me as well. It's just because this deacon would just go eat lunch at our restaurant and just made a friend, and that was kind of how even me as that young person, I dropped community college at this point, but I was still that kind of college age and just kind of working. But I think that's probably that mentality, that kingdom mentality, that disciple making mentality is I'm just going to kind of embed myself in these different pockets of the city or the town or wherever you're in and just try to meet people. And it's kind of hard to put your finger on. It's a lot of decentralized ministry. It doesn't look pretty. It doesn't feel pretty, but it's worth it. And so, guys, thanks for coming on today. This was such a great conversation. It's fun talking to you guys. And just appreciate y'all being on.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, well, guys, thanks for listening to the Roundup Podcast. I really want to say, if you're listening to this, please subscribe to our podcast. We're on just tons of different platforms, Apple, Spotify, all those kind of things. So give us a subscribe, review. And I also want to say, if you want to lean in a little bit more to this talk on community colleges, I want you to come to our Texas Roundup. It's going to be May 12th to the 14th in Austin, Texas. It's completely free. You can register online at sbtexas.com/roundup. But come on, we're going to have this conversation some more. You'll get to meet some other leaders. It'll be an awesome, awesome time. And don't forget to follow our social media. It's at SBTC Collegiate. We're on Instagram. We're on Twitter. We're on Facebook. Come check us out. We'd love to kind of keep up with you, and we'll kind of keep you informed of what all we do through those channels. And we have a Facebook group called Roundup Network. We've got over 260 leaders in there. We'd love to have you jump in and create some conversation around this topic. Well, friends, thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time.